Kuwait has long been considered the desert flower in the Gulf, the state most likely to become a secular democracy due to its progressive outlook and relatively liberal society. This vision is interrupted by the constant problem of the rights, access to rights, and participation of stateless people in Kuwait. There are some 100,000 stateless people resident in Kuwait and over 2 million stateless people throughout the world. They don't have local governments to partition. They are constantly having to rely on other players to support them. There is some confusion over rights and benefits, particularly among Western audiences. Law reform has allocated the Bedoon different classes of identity status, delivered to some limited rights and others full citizenship, while yet others have received no benefits at all. Representation of the Bedoon occurs in a confused atmosphere where it's difficult to tell who has what rights, and organised, sustained protest for rights has led to some pundits calling for spring in Kuwait. The Bedoon face the challenge of representing themselves authentically and constructing their own claims to rights and responsibilities as citizens. Despite this, they demonstrate agency and integration in the community alongside Kuwaitis. While the government plans for Kuwaiti citizens to replace the expatriate population across all fields through the Kuwaitisation economic policy, research indicates that they would prefer a professional degree education and to work in an associated professional field. Both Kuwaiti citizens and stateless people resident in Kuwait have protested regularly since 2011, unhappy with government reforms for different reasons. I propose that as some Bedoon are granted citizenship and others inevitably receive lesser benefits, a model of reform that includes community education can help Kuwait achieve its future economic and social goals that are set out in the Kuwaitisation policy. Analyses of Kuwaiti efficiency and work style indicate that building social capital values would be of some benefit to citizens. This is possible through community education. Learning to work harder and smarter for less money cannot happen overnight. Forcing citizens to do so will lead to social unrest or even voluntary unemployment, and both are happening in Kuwait at the moment. In light of these responses, a thoughtful approach to economic transformation may be needed. Increasing diversification of the jobs market and community-based engagement provide other opportunities for Kuwaitis to participate meaningfully in society as their economy expands, diversifies, and grows more independent of sovereign wealth. Simultaneously, local employers are calling for local Kuwaiti labour and Arab labour to fill positions, and the government wishes to transfer local people into jobs as part of its Kuwaitisation policy. The Bedoon have historically provided for security to the state through military and policing. They have a reputation for being hard-working and loyal employees. Right now, they are mostly dependent on Kuwaiti family members and the secondary economy. some Kuwaitis are reluctant to study courses to enter the vocational and technical fields and to work in those related jobs where they have to work harder for less money in the private sector. There is an opportunity for the Bedoon to provide service in the vocational and technical sectors to fill this gap. Bedoon have called for increased participation in employment and in higher education through citizenship or the citizenship-like rights that they once enjoyed. This would enable them to be educated and to work freely in Kuwait as they did before the mid-1980s. They are likely enthusiastic to enter the vocational and technical fields and to work in related jobs. Evidence to suggest this abounds in media reporting on Bedoon peaceful protest, where they request greater participation in Kuwait. This would involve a spring in Kuwait of another kind, increased participation for the Bedoon through education and employment, particularly in the vocational and technical sectors, and increasingly diverse study and career options for Kuwaiti citizens. The Bedoon are people without nationality. This study concerns the Bedoon of Kuwait, stateless people who've long been members of Kuwaiti society but lost their citizenship-like rights in the 1980s. Tutrold, Longva and Bergrand are researchers who have established that the Bedoon are economic participants in Kuwait, but as yet researchers have not explored this topic from the point of view of the Bedoon as established members of the community in Kuwait. This approach acknowledges the historical integration of the Bedoon in society, their participation in employment and their loyalty to the existing body politic. I suggest that similarly to the historical role that the Bedoon have played in securing the state via their service in the military and policing, that they have the capacity to fill gaps in the labour force that Kuwaiti citizens remain reluctant or unable to fill. The Kuwaitisation policy does not address the accompanying social resistance of the citizen base to redirect them from degree programs and employment in the public sector into college programs and employment in the technical and vocational fields in the private sector that have been called by some socially unacceptable in research by Al-Ali. The Kuwaitisation policy rests on assumptions that Kuwaitis will become responsible for their own incomes, deprofessionalise and increase productivity at the same time. Yet Kuwaiti citizens prefer to work in professional sectors and they tend to be unproductive in the workplace in their professional jobs in the public sector. Worse, Abdullah and Al-Hamoud cite that unemployment is highest among the best educated of Kuwaitis, who choose unemployment before employment in the private sector, where competition and productivity expectations are higher. Whether or not this crisis is a matter of the way people are educated or reflective of a deeper cultural attitude, areas of the labour force requiring local workers where citizens don't want to work could be gaps that are filled by the Bedoon who do want to work. The Bedoon have a reputation for hard work such that they persist in finding opportunities to be productive even in the face of restrictions. Continuing adult education facilitates a socially rich experience that builds communities of learners. Because courses are not accredited, this kind of education encourages a stress-free, friendly, social informality. This in turn promotes teamwork, cooperation and social cohesion, and even increased tolerance. The continuing adult education model, for this reason, makes sense for Kuwait. It can enhance the social capital base that's urgently needed to increase workplace efficiency for those educated citizens who have been unemployed for long periods because they could not find a suitable public service job, and for Bedoon who have missed out on schooling and require foundation literacy and numeracy skills before moving on to higher levels of education and work. The usual mechanism for Bedoon to acquire legal residency status for whole families while waiting to be granted citizenship where eligible is through a work permit. A long-term solution could involve legal residency status extended to the Bedoon through an organised framework of education and job sponsorship. Sponsorship could lead directly to employment after higher education has been completed, along with an accompanying work permit. This need not compromise the existing system of inquiry into citizenship and residency claims. The cost of education sponsorship by the government could be returned to the state through a taxation system on employment, similar to systems found in other countries. This would ensure that the government would remain interested in helping the Bedoon to obtain long-term employment that's related to their higher education to enable them to repay their education expenses. Sponsored access to education and employment in labour force gap areas would enable the Bedoon a viable means of acquiring residency, education and employment. It would allow them to contribute in a substantial way to the economic capital of Kuwait in areas not competing with citizen preferences. Before the Iraqi invasion, other Arabs took up many of the positions now occupied by expatriates from other parts of the world. Ultimately, the education and training of Bedoon residents, long-term residents of Kuwait who have been there for generations, along with more recent stateless Arab arrivals, could return balance to the region, helping to solve the region-wide dilemma of displaced Arabs and chronic local skills shortages. Further, the growing economy must diversify. There will be more and more different kinds of jobs opening up into the future that young Kuwaitis can go into, increasing workplace productivity and efficiency by training willing, motivated workers who are currently unemployed might be a more effective alternative of managing the vast numbers of stateless people in Kuwait rather than restricting them to a frustratingly idle lifestyle that is a constant drain on the government, Kuwaiti families and Kuwait's international reputation.